please subscribe to the Berkshire Heroes channel. Have you clicked that button yet? Pressed it? Thank you so much. Now on with the show. I'm Laura Blumenthal on the Berkshire Heroes podcast, and a big welcome today to Joanna Day, a fashion designer based in Crowthorne. Welcome, Joanna.
Oh, thank you for having me on.
Now, you have your own brand, Byzantium, which includes a boutique on Crowthorne High Street, and you've also showcased your designs at London Fashion Week. So start by telling me, what's been your personal journey to becoming a fashion designer? What are your most proudest achievements? And tell me a bit about your brand, Byzantium.
Okay. Well, I wanted to be a fashion designer from ever since I was 5 years old. I cannot remember ever wanting to do anything else, not even for, 5 minutes. Little kids are often like, I want to be a nurse, or I want to be a vet, or I want to do this, or I want to do that. I just remember being so young and just always drawing. And I got gifted that fashion wheel, the NB Games fashion wheel, and it was a wheel that you could spin, and it would you could change into this top with this skirt or whatever. And I just got rid of the whole thing and drew my own because there wasn't enough options, and I was about 5. So I just it's something that I always wanted to do. I would sit in school, in any lessons that I thought were boring, in my brain would just be like a catwalk and the models and the lighting and what they were wearing and everything. So it was from a very, very, very young age. And London Fashion Week was always the dream. That was, I was always like, if I can have a show at London Fashion Week, then then I've done everything that I've sort of wanted to do. So I used to just sit and daydream about it really all the time. I went to London College of Fashion. I went to school in Bracknell in Berkshire, and we couldn't do things like textiles GCSEs or A levels because nobody wanted to do it. Like, everybody wanted to do graphics, was quite new, and food tech and stuff. So they couldn't run like a textiles GCSE for one kid, or A level for one kid that wanted to do it. So I sort of railroaded my A levels to be fashion. And when we got to do a designer, I did like Vivienne Westwood, and like when we had to do our essays and dissertations, I would kind of do them on designers, so I could sort of try and incorporate that way. And I did sewing with one of my mum's friends, and I was like kind of like stitching stuff myself in my bedroom and just sort of like trying to learn really. And I did a fine art history project on Byzantine art, and from there it all just kind of linked. I'm half Lebanese, half English, and my family are from all over. My family name's originally Italian, so when I would go abroad and we would go on sort of family holidays and things, we would often go to, places like Cyprus, which has a lot of ancient sort of like Byzantine ruins. Same with if you go to sort of Greece, Turkey, if you go to Lebanon, there's Baalbek. So I kind of went on those sort of holidays as a kid where I would see all of these ancient ruins, and then I incorporated them into my artwork. And then I always just thought to myself, if I could have a brand on a period of time that would never date, like, it could be amazing, because, historically humans have always loved golds and emeralds and pearls and details and embellishing. So it's kind of like a rebellion against fast fashion as well, because it's based on everything like traditional. I do a lot by hand, and like, humans have never stopped being obsessed with gemstones, have they? So it's kind of like a modern day rebellion against fast fashion. And it incorporates a lot of art. Like, to me, fashion is art that you wear, like, somebody's created that piece. It's something that I always wanted to do. And when I was younger, my grandmother would always take us to lots of like old Byzantine ruins and churches and things. And I just, it was just all there in my brain, and I wanted to kind of put it together, but I didn't really know how, because I was sort of so young and like doing A levels and stuff. So I got a place at the London College of Fashion, and I was really, really so happy to go there and to get in. And I'd vowed to myself that if I didn't get in, because at the time everything was so different to now, but at the time you'd have to go and lay your portfolio out on a table and then go away, and then they would decide whether they'd interview you or not. But my portfolio was art, because I hadn't done like, you know, textiles GCSE or anything. So I was kind of sort of like walking around Oxford Street and Bond Street shaking, thinking, you know, what if I don't get in? And then I just remember saying to myself, it's your dream. If you don't get in, you'll just have to take a year out, try and somehow learn some textiles experience, and just do like a gap year, but like a working gap year, and then just reapply next year, because I just like I didn't want to go anywhere else. But luckily I got in, and I learned how to do pattern cutting and draping and all of that sort of thing, and the concept of getting that design from your head and sketching it out and sourcing and making a collection. So yeah, I was very focused, and you know, like sometimes kids don't know what to do, like with their, you know, A levels and GCSEs and stuff, and it's, you know, it's really difficult because there's so many options to choose from. You know, my daughter's doing her A levels now, and you know, she'll say to me, "How did you know what you wanted to do?" But I never knew anything else. Like I only ever wanted to do that from when I was like 5. So I've was so tunnel visioned in it that I can't imagine what it's like to do anything else.
I love that you're living your childhood dream, Joanna. That is amazing and so inspirational. So, how long has Byzantium, the brand, been going on for now? And if you could choose a celebrity to dress, who would you choose that really embodies the Byzantium brand?
Well, the brand itself has been going for about 3 years. So I finished fashion college. I was doing various work experiences and stuff. I was working in Harvey Nichols at the time when I was at fashion college. I did loads of jobs. I was like waitressing, hotels, restaurants, you know, working in, I worked in a cafe in Clapham, and, you know, saved up the money to buy fabrics. And so I always, you know, I didn't just get a job straight in fashion, you know, I was waitressing for years and doing all sorts of stuff. And I thought I'll try and get a Saturday job in Harvey Nichols to just, you know, glam up my CV a little bit, because it's so hard to get fashion work experiences and things. And then from there, I kind of then got some other work experiences through Harvey Nichols. I did a little one in the press office and the buying office, and then I decided I actually want to be a fashion buyer, because I saw how in retail that the fashion buyers they have so much power, because a designer can design something, particularly if you are not so much at that level, but particularly at a high street brand. A designer can design something, and the buyer will come along and say that sleeve isn't commercial enough, so axe the sleeve. Or a department store buyer, which is what I'd then decided I wanted to do, because, you know, we always sort of jump around in our careers, don't we, even if it's in the same career. I decided I wanted to be a department store buyer because they were actively choosing what brands to put in the stores, and then what from each brand that they liked. So they seemed to have all this power, and I thought, you know, I could spend my whole life designing, and then they might not even select it, or they might say, because when you design, you're not really thinking about whether something's commercial or not. You're just doing what you like, and you can get a bit carried away, like, like if you look at my runways, I always do a couple of press pieces, and, you know, I don't expect anyone to wear a Victorian crinoline with hand sewn on bits of gold, but it looks great on the runway. And when you
I
design,
think Zendaya would look great
she
in
would.
that. I
I
think
mean,
she'd be perfect for
she would.
your brand.
So yeah, so I decided to go off and become a retail buyer, and I became a buyer for 12 years. I worked for Phoenix stores. I did all different jobs before that, you know, like I said, like waitressing and retail work in Harvey Nichols, and different press experiences and personal shopping, and, you know, setting up fashion exhibitions and all sorts. And so I actually set up the Byzantium brand after I left Phoenix stores. I had my youngest daughter, I was on maternity leave, and they were making some changes in the buying office. And I just thought to myself, now is the time to start thinking about actually doing this, because you've got all the retail training now, like budgets, forecasting, margins, how to actually make money. You know, I'm not running around Paris buying fabrics and then selling a dress for less than it costs to make, because I've had all of that retail training. So I started to, after I had my youngest daughter, I started to put together like a brand concept and how I would do it. And I was self-employed, and I did various other things, like various other franchise opportunities, and learned how to work online, and you know, did all sorts of bits and bobs. But it was officially properly born about 3 years ago.
And
And
you've got your store on Crowthorne High Street, and for a lot of companies, they're 100% online. So why is it important for your brand to have a physical footprint, and what have some of the obstacles been?
the first obstacle is that I'm upstairs. So the rents are so high on the high street, and there are so many empty units. There's a unit that I would love to rent that I've seen. It was used to be a dry cleaners, and it's got all like these columns, and it, you know, because it kind of looks like Roman Byzantine columns, and it's all just been painted, and it's got these big windows. And you know, I'd love to go in there and rent there with like maybe a milliner, you know, like, so we could share the space, maybe a photographer, like, because it's quite a big unit. And I think it would be so good for like some small businesses to get together and rent it. But when you look at how much it actually costs to rent it per month, and the fees and the business rates and the tax, it's there are some months where I would just be on a minus. So I decided that I really needed a premises. So I actually started the brand from home. In COVID, you know, everybody was sort of like waiting to get to their events again. And I thought, you know, I live right near Royal Ascot, Henley Regatta, and everyone's going to want to go to these events, and they're not going to want to wear something on the high street that everyone else has after have been in lockdown for so many years. This is the year of events. So I started selling some nice kind of like ready to wear, sort of made in Italy, like for people to go out into the world again. And then I was sort of sharing it on Instagram and things like that. And then there was this opportunity that came up for me to show at London Fashion Week. I did that show. They loved the brand concept, and, you know, the fact that it was really different. And, you know, I was kind of like deconstructing garments and making like really catwalky pieces. And, but I felt like such an imposter, because I made that entire collection from an IKEA table in my living room when the kids were at school. So the first show that I did at London Fashion Week, I thought someone was going to tap me on the shoulder and go, "You need to go home. Like, this is like, you don't even have a design studio. Like, what are you doing here?" But everybody loved, like, you know, the runway pieces, and the models love wearing it. And I had a great time. I mean, I was absolutely petrified and so nervous. But I decided I needed a design studio. Like, I couldn't keep having like boxes stacked up in my spare room, and, you know, opening out an IKEA table, setting up a sewing machine when the kids are at school, and making stuff. And, you know, I didn't want them to be coming home from school and me going, "Oh, you know, don't touch this, don't touch that," you know how it is. So I just was like, I need to rent a premises. I had a look at South Hill Park in Bracknell, because that's like an art centre, and they do like, you know, jewellery making and stuff. And I thought, oh, perhaps I'd be able to share a studio there with somebody. But they didn't have any space at the time. And then my brother-in-law works on Crowthorne High Street, and there are a couple of units available above where he works. There's a phone repair shop. And then the second unit is a beauty salon. So I thought, okay, if I'm actually above a beauty salon, this could work really well, because we could send each other customers, and, you know, and it's actually quite a good location. Crowthorne's all free parking, which is great. And there's loads to do in Crowthorne High Street. Like, so there's lots of reasons to go there. So, you know, people could go there for their shopping. There's a couple of supermarkets. There's a few pubs. There's a wine bar and restaurant now. There's, you know, nail salons, beauty salons, tea rooms, coffee shops. So I thought, you know what, this actually is quite a bustly little high street. There's loads of parking, there's loads of things to do. So I'm going to take a leap, and I'm going to rent this place above this beauty salon, and I've been there for a couple of years now. I dodged your celebrity question, not unintentionally. Yeah, definitely Zendaya. I mean, who wouldn't want Zendaya? But I also really love Jenna Ortega. I always feel like everything she wears, like she really goes for it. Like, especially with all the Wednesday premieres, like she really goes into the look. But yeah, definitely Zendaya.
Should look fantastic on all your luxury collections of
She
Byzantium. It would be
would.
amazing on
Yeah.
her. I'm so ignorant about the fashion industry, so I wouldn't know the first thing about what the process is to showcase designs at London Fashion Week. What happened for you to be able to do that? And is it as glamorous as people think it is, or is it really quite stressful behind the scenes?
It's tough. It's one of those it's one of those things, and it's all changing now because the British Fashion Council has a new CEO. So everything is changing. Historically, it used to be um, the bigger designers, you pay a fee to show with the British Fashion Council, and you do a show which is called On Schedule, and it means they put you on their schedule, and you've got to be a member of the British Fashion Council, which is great. Who wouldn't want to be a member of the British Fashion Council? But there's quite a large fee that you would pay for that. So it's just like one of those things. Like, it costs quite a lot of money to put a fashion show on. If you think about, you've got to hire a venue, someone to do the lighting, you've got to do models, hair, makeup, all of those sort of things. So I actually did my first show, and I've done all of my shows with a lady called Gaia Beck, and she runs a company called Fashion Represents, and she pulls together smaller designers in an amazing venue, and then we pool the hair and makeup artists and models. So the venue is being split by all of us costs, the DJ, the sound, the hair and makeup artists and models and stuff. So, and then we would show, like, the show would be from like maybe 8 to 9 p.m. or something like that. And every designer has like their slot, and then there's like an interval. So that, I found that a much better way of doing it, a much more affordable way of doing it, because you're with other creatives, and it's fun. B, it's not as scary, and C, it's doable and it's affordable, because if you've got to think about it, you've got to get your fabrics, you've got to make a collection. If you have anybody that is helping you make that collection, they need to be paid, of course. And then you have to get yourself up to London and then get everything all sorted. And I do everything myself for the collection. So in terms of the idea, the mood board, how I want it to look, get the fabrics. I do have an intern called Shanika, who's amazing, and she helps me. She does a bit of embroidery, but I only have her for like 4 hours a week. And I do the odd sort of like work experience, and have like interns come in that are maybe at college or university and stuff, because not everybody wants to go into London for an internship as well, especially if it's say if they're at Farnborough 6th or they're at college locally. It's quite a cost to go into London for 2 weeks as well, like for them to do that. And it's, if they're quite young, they might not want to do that. So it's quite good for them to be able to go somewhere locally, because historically there isn't that many places you can go for fashion without traveling into London.
And they can learn the industry from you, and also get that hands-on experience as well. What advice do you give them as fresh faces who want to break into the fashion industry? What is your advice as someone who's lived it, you've got your own brand? What is the one piece of advice that you think would really be helpful to them?
It really is that kind of like having that thick skin and just keeping going. Like the first time I went to London Fashion Week was when I was at fashion college, and I pretended to be a journalist for the college to try and get in. They said no, by the way, so that didn't work. But because I wanted to be in there so much. I just wanted to see what was going on there. And obviously they, unless you're invited by a designer, you couldn't go. And it used to be at the National History Museum then. So I thought, well, if I pretend to be part of the college newspaper or something, then maybe they'll let me in and I'll get to see. But sadly, it didn't happen. But that is why I always take interns with me, because I think fashion students are the future, and they should, we need fashion students to go and see behind the scenes. And, especially now when we're thinking about sustainability and the future of the fashion industry and how to take fashion forward, I think students and interns are really important, and it's really, really important for them to be able to get to see Fashion Week. At least now in the digital age, they can watch some shows digitally, or, they could set up a LinkedIn account and watch a lot of the big shows being live streamed if they wanted to. So there are ways and means now, whereas back in my day there was it wasn't being streamed anywhere. There wasn't a watch party or a LinkedIn live stream of the show. So yeah, I think you just have to never ever ever give up. And a lot of people will say to you about how difficult the industry is, but it is one of the biggest industries. And when if you want a job in fashion, and you really want a job in fashion, and that's what sets your soul on fire, there are so many areas. Like, you don't have to be a fashion designer. You could be a fashion stylist, you could be a costume designer, you could be a choreographer. Like, there are people whose job it is to teach models how to walk. There are people that put on productions and actually the staging of shows and that sort of thing. There's hair and makeup, special effects, fashion journalism, fashion photography. So it is a big industry. You could even look at things like fashion marketing and PR and content creation. So buying and merchandising, like, it's endless. When you think about it, fashion is all around us. And I think between fashion and probably gaming, they're some of the biggest industries. So there are lots of jobs in there. So maybe if you're flexible, and like me, I wanted to do fashion design, and then I went off and became a buyer for a few years because I decided I wanted to go in that direction and then return. I think if you want to work in fashion but you're not sure what area you want to do, you could just do loads of different work experiences, and lots of it can be quite specific as well. Like, some companies recruit knitwear designers or lingerie designers, and they focus entirely on, say, knitwear or tailoring or lingerie. So if you are feeling like what you want is really niche, that might not go against you, because a lot of people just don't know what they want. They just know they want to work in the industry. So
it's one of the biggest industries in the UK. We're so fortunate. It's a real leading light. And of course, we've got lots of creatives in this country too. When it comes to your designs, do you create them all personally yourself? Do you get people to support you? How difficult has it been to find people with the right skills to create your collections?
So I have a couple of dressmakers that I work with for certain projects and things like that. Because I watched the Victoria Beckham documentary, and I love Victoria Beckham. I've always loved her. And there's a scene in it where the models, they've decided the looks, and then the model goes off to the atelier, and then their look gets made. And I'm like, oh, I'd love to have that. That would be the dream. So I have my studio in Crowthorne, where I make and I create things. I often upcycle things as well. Like, I'll find a garment and I'll deconstruct it and rework it and pin it on a mannequin. And when I was in fashion college, I actually hated pattern cutting. I did it, but I hated it. I used to really like pinning something on a mannequin and working it that way. So I'd literally just get the fabric, pin it on exactly how I wanted, add the zip, and sew it that way and transfer it. But you can't do that en masse. So so some of the items in the collection, so what I do for, say, Fashion Week, is I'll make 12 looks, and then some of them I'll make entirely myself. A lot of them are hand beaded and hand embroidered. Some of them are upcycled, so they're like dresses and things that I found that have, there might be at a vintage fair or in a charity shop, or they might be just really sad and they need a bit of love, and then I'll completely rework it, you know, and change it completely. And then other things I will, like, you know, I'll get somebody to make it if I think, you know, my pattern cutting skills are not up to that one. The design's there in my brain and I know what I want to do. I'm actually a lot better at the beading and embroidering than I am at drafting patterns. So, but I have a little team of people that are like my known and sort of trusted people. They're all local. They're dressmakers. Like one's ex-bridal couture, and you know, one lives down the road from me, and it's great to be able to have that kind of team. And I just look for the people that have been doing it for so long, and you know, you can just look at their work, but obviously that comes at a cost. So it's another cost to add to the collection, because, you know, I'll give you an example. Prom, people will think, oh well, it's easier to get a dress made, but if a fabric is £100 a meter and you need 7 meters, it's not going to be cheaper to get the dress made, because you're going to have spent £700 before you've even paid anybody for their time. So you know, it's quite costly to get people to make your items. But for the last show, I was really lucky that I actually had a couple of sponsors, like aligned brand partners. I had a luxury hotel group, the Rosette Hotel Group, and a skincare brand, which obviously that really helped me get some better fabrics. And because it can be tough, like making a collection on a really limited budget, but it's one thing throughout if you speak to any of the fashion journalists, they will always say to you that in the UK, British designers can make collections out of nothing. Like they can just make, because it's just the thing with British designers. We don't have the big French couture houses or, you know, the Italian ateliers. So, you know, Alexander McQueen once got a load of cling film, ran a tire over it in paint and put a zip in it and sent it down the runway, and it looked amazing. You know, and John Galliano and I made a second collection out of purely black fabric because it was the only fabric he could afford, and he turned it inside out and he worked with it the right way and the wrong way, and he embroidered it, and he made the most stunning collection. And I have probably spent 3 years, and I'm not ashamed to admit, I've made a lot of the collections literally on a shoestring, like, you know, finding fabrics, finding trims, finding little beads in vintage shops and reworking them and sort of sewing them on by hand. But I don't think you'd look at the collection and know that. I think you'd look at the collection and you see all the detailing and the beading, and like, you know, when you look at some of the beads, say in my last collection, and you look at like the beads and the collars and stuff, you like it, nobody would know that they're from a charity shop or from a vintage market or a little seller on Etsy. They just see the final product and they think, oh wow, it's really, really glamorous. And it is glamorous for the one day that you're there. But you know, when you look at everyone at midnight who's like kind of like, you know, sat on their bed, you know, finally having something to eat because it's been like a super long day, and it's very glamorous for the event, but the before and after is not so glamorous.
And the people you invite to your show at London Fashion Week, are they mostly PRs and journalists and buyers and potential sponsors? Who do you want there really, and what do you want to come out of it?
Well, as I said, I've done my shows with a company called Fashion Represent, which I really, really adore working with them because I adore their whole ethos. They haven't just given me like a creative platform, but they are inclusive. So in terms of models, they could have a model who's 5'4" and not 5'9". So it's an open casting. Anyone can apply to the casting. I had a model who walks with a walking stick. She was actually Miss Great Britain for Miss Surrey, but she walks with a walking stick. You know, so it doesn't matter if you're a size 6 or a size 8 or a size 18, you can apply. My catwalks and runway shows have generally been from size 6 to 20. So that's what I love about working with them. It's an inclusive community and it's an inclusive catwalk, but it's also an inclusive audience because they keep amount of tickets for students and people to buy. So, you know, my family have been to all my shows. You know, my family aren't press or journalists, or but I want them at my shows because it was my parents who put me through fashion college in the first place. You know, it was my sister that helped me behind the scenes when I was, you know, doing my first show and I couldn't get a zip up and we had to get some WD-40 out, you know, and it, like just things like that. Like they've been with me, my friends and family have been with me the whole journey. So I love the fact that I can invite them. And yes, of course I invite the press and journalists and, you know, like the people from the industry, but also, you know, anybody could buy a ticket. And I think if that was what frustrated me when I was younger, that I couldn't go. I was in fashion college. I got myself into London College of Fashion. I had a fashion degree, yet I could not get into London Fashion Week without being invited by a designer, you know, and I found that really frustrating. Obviously, I got to go years later when I was a buyer, but I think it would be, you know, it was something that bugged me as a student. Like I wanted to see, you know, this is where I want to go. Like, why can't I get in there? So I think if you're going to have an inclusive catwalk, it's nice to also be able to have an inclusive audience and not cut anybody off. Like, so invite only is great, you know, and that's how a lot of designers do their shows. But, you know, you could miss somebody that would have really benefited from coming to that show, or, you know, somebody might be, you know, in London for an amount of time and they might want to attend Fashion Week. And, you know, just because I don't know who they are doesn't mean that they shouldn't attend a show if they want to attend a show. So I love
I
that.
didn't know it was so open. I thought it was a closed shop. You could only be invited by the designers or if you're a particular member or
Well, that's
something.
the thing.
Um,
And normally it is, but Fashion Represents have always done an element of ticket sales as well. So, and they're not
Good for them.
stupidly expensive either. Like there was like, you know, tickets for like 29 quid or something. Like it's not like, okay, you can come, but you've got to pay £200 to, you know, like, so I think it's quite nice and inclusive. And then of course I can take interns for the day. I took a photography intern. I took a student who's just gone off to fashion university. I've had loads of interns at Fashion Week, and they really love sort of being behind the scenes and seeing what's going on. But I think it's really important for them to do it whilst they're studying rather than later on when they've got a job, because it helps them work out what area they want to go in and what they enjoy.
I was talking to a man who owns a fashion company based in Kent, and they do really intricate dresses. They sell to the royal Saudi royal family, and he was saying how difficult it is to employ people to do that intricate embroidery. And he just can't find anyone. They're giving good salaries, they'll offer training, but there seems to be a bit of a disconnect of lots of talented people coming out of fashion colleges and universities, and then these brands who are crying out for people who are maybe not London based. Is that something you recognize from the people that you
Absolutely,
know?
100%. And it's a lost art. Like in Great Britain, we have lost the art. Like Nottingham used to be famous for all the lace factories. That famous Nottingham lace. I think the whole lace market now is all just shops and cafes. You know, like I think there could potentially be one still remaining very small lace company. But, you know, in like two generations, we've lost the art of that. You know, like I said, I'm this kid in school that wanted to do textiles, and they're like, well, everyone's doing graphic design, so get over it. You know, and it's a lost art. It's starting to come back, but you know, we've lost two generations of embroiderers, really, when you think about it, because nothing is made in the UK anymore, and everything gets made abroad and sent in. And it is such a shame because it's so beautiful. And if you look at all the top designers, when you look at things like, you know, Giorgio Armani passed away, and when you look at his designs that shine and sparkle, they're the ones with all the beading. And when you look at like as the Oscars or something like that, there's a dress that Natalie Portman wore a couple of years ago, and it looks like a Dior. It's a Dior dress, but it looks like an impressionist painting. And someone well, a team, not one person, but hundreds and hundreds of hours of hand sewing on all those little beads. That's what we've lost in the UK. We've lost, I mean, it was world famous for lace making, but we don't have any silk weavers in London anymore.
I didn't know if it meant that there were actually people coming out of the fashion colleges with these skills, but there was just something going wrong with them not linking up with the right employers for them. Or actually, as it seems that you said, we just don't have the skills in this country anymore.
And where everybody wants to do everything digitally, you know, it's maybe fashion students find it more appealing than sitting and doing embroidery, that maybe they find it more appealing to go and do content creation or fashion management or branding, because everything's online and everything's digital, and and fashion branding and communication is so important, because if I wouldn't have a brand, it's all very well and good if I could sit at home and make the most amazing dress in the world, but if nobody markets it and nobody knows it's there, then it's still just a dress sat at home, isn't it? And you don't have a brand. So I also wonder if when we watch shows like historical shows like Bridgerton and those sort of things, and it's a bit like there was the woman sat by herself with her embroidery hoop, and it makes it look like it's an old-fashioned thing, and it's whereas girls now don't want to be sat in a bustle with an embroidery hoop. I just wonder if people think it's the thing of the past, where in the last couple of generations we don't have clothing factories and stuff in the UK, do we? And we don't do those sort of things. It seems to be that like embroidery, there's a perception that it's just for like fashion history and costume and theatre, but actually embroidery is on everything we love. Like,
So if someone's doing a fashion degree or they're going to the local fashion college, do they learn these practical skills of embroidery? Because that seems to be what's in demand, or is it more theory and digital, as you say?
So there are like guilds that teach embroidery and stuff, and it's a bit like a lot of people are crocheting now, aren't they? Like they're crocheting little bits and bobs, and that's like the current trend. But when I was at fashion college, there was a separate course for embroidery, because I did fashion design and technology, women's wear, which was like pattern cutting and draping, but there was a whole separate course for embroidery because it's so detailed and there's so many different techniques. And I have an intern that works for me, and she did embroidery at the Berkshire College of Agriculture, and they're focused on embroidery techniques. And my daughter did textiles GCSE, and they would focus on embroidery techniques. So it's there. It's just whether maybe more fashion students go into the digital thing like out of choice because we live in a digital age. But it would be so good if we could, it's such a shame that there aren't enough students that could go and do embroidery at that level. I think it's an assumption thing as well, because a lot of people think that they would have to go to Paris, to somewhere like Oscar de la Renta to sew on all the little sequin paillettes. I think it's just because we don't make stuff in the UK. I think people just assume that it's Savile Row, which is tailoring, or everything's abroad.
I think we're still the 9th biggest manufacturer in the world, so we are still making things, as you know well yourself.
Yeah.
And I wondered, what is it that you're focusing on right now in your business, and how can people find Byzantium online?
So that was a tricky one, because if you actually type in Byzantium, you go to the ancient old Constantinople, because obviously it was based on the ancient Byzantine Empire. But I have a website, which is www.byzantiumboutique.co.uk. I have Instagram, which is where I get most of my sort of traction and interaction from. And that I've called it House of Byzantium. As a creative, I'm always changing things around. I changed the name of that yesterday because I do so much stuff. I do sort of like ready to wear. I don't just do like wonderful catwalk pieces. I do have ready to wear that I use my buying skills from, and I use factories that make in Italy, and it's kind of like, fair fashion, not, loads and loads of fast fashion quantities and things like that. So I've decided to call it House of Byzantium. So that's on Instagram. So yeah, it's funny that we're that we're the 9th biggest manufacturer, because everybody here seems to just think that you can't get any clothes made in the UK, you know?
Oh dear, that doesn't sound good at all.
I know.
I mean, we manufacture all sorts of things. I'm not talking about just fashion, but in the whole. I've got a final question for you,
Yeah.
Joanna. If you were Prime Minister, what would you change about the UK and why?
So it leads into what we were just saying, actually, because I was thinking about this one. France just fined Shein £40 million. Italy have fined Shein as well. So they fined them for things like greenwashing, misleading marketing, all sorts of things like that. Because obviously these big companies like Shein and Temu are, they are causing so much waste. They're mass producing millions of items. It's if you can get a pair of trousers for £6, are they ethically made? Not really, because it cost me £5 to post something from Bracknell to Yateley. So to get something over from somewhere like China, the postage alone would be that amount. So, and then there's been all of these studies where the garment workers are being paid 3p or 3 cents a garment. And, are there bars on the windows and doors? There was a documentary on about Shein saying that garment workers had put "help me" in the labels. And there's always been so many investigations about these big factories that just churn out so much stuff so cheaply, like not just from a pollution and a waste side, but humans, is it ethical, is it slave labor? All of the things that we thought were things of the past are very much still happening with a lot of these big companies. And there's lots of documentaries on all of the different ones. And it's been a big thing recently that a lot of the European countries are looking into. I know France have fined 40 million. I know Italy have fined. If I was Prime Minister, I would fine, just like France have, and I would put the money into UK manufacturing and create local jobs, because, the market's there for it. We all love fashion. We have lace markets that are no longer, being used. We have there are studios in London where you can make a collection. Like there's lots of studios in London, like especially in East London, like Threadneedle Street and Curtain Road and Singer Street and stuff. So there are studios in London, but they're so expensive to make a collection because, of the costs of, the cost of living crisis and everything like that. And not much is made here. So yeah, I would be getting on that fine bandwagon if I was Prime Minister, and I would be fining, and I would put the money into UK manufacturing of clothing, and not purely importing all our clothing. Like, there are some factories. When I used to buy for Fenwick, there was a factory in Warminster that hand makes leather gloves. That they would be the kind of places that I would be supporting.
I was thinking about Rosie Writing. She's a MP who got elected last year. She said that she was the first ever MP that has come from the fashion world. She was a fashion buyer until very recently. And she asked some very probing questions of Shein when they were invited to a select committee in Westminster. So it's certainly an area which is being treated seriously. And there are issues to do with sustainability and workers' rights and all sorts of welfare issues. So I think MPs would be in agreement with you for that one, because it is a serious issue, and we want to know when we get our clothes, wherever they're from, that the workers are being paid fairly and it's not causing huge issues with the environment. So no, more power to you on that. Thank you so much, Joanna Day, for joining me on the Berkshire Heroes podcast. It's been a pleasure to talk with you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you so much for having me on.
And please remember to subscribe to the Berkshire Heroes channel.